Oh, yeah. The NFL draft and rookies. Hell yeah.
Podcast off the rails already.
But there is not a chance in hell Justin Fields is finishing in the top 10.
You know what, Mikey? Shut it.
He wants
Why
it.
not?
You don't want the smoke.
He's Calvin Johnson. He's Calvin
Oh,
Johnson.
good.
Oh,
God.
my
Yes,
God.
yes, and yes.
What are we gonna do with you?
It just, it adds a little extra flavor to the podcast.
I think you're disrespecting David Njoku.
Thank God
Yeah.
for Joe Flacco. That's all I can say. I'll help the owners. Don't draft Kadarius Toney.
I have to give the people what they want. I mean, come on. I'm going to milk it. I'm going to milk it for all it's worth.
I'll give you something to milk.
Let's rock and roll.
What is up, MHA owners? Happy New Year! As we're recording this on Thursday, January 2nd of 2025. That doesn't sound like a real number. The fantasy football season is over, and we get to crown a brand new champion after Kilgore Trout defeats the Hot Tamales this past weekend. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast. I'm Eric Lansing, along with Todd Diamond, Mikey Renault, and of course,
The champ is here.
that's right, the champ is here. Joe Vaccarelli is going to join us here on the podcast. How is everybody doing?
Woo! It's 2025, y'all.
That's right.
Another year. Like you said, yeah, that number doesn't sound. It sounds like something like out of a sci-fi movie. Like when they cut to the near future and it's 20. You're just like, oh, okay, that's just something in the movie. But now when the number's real, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But it's we're here. That's all that matters. We made it for another year, fellas. It's another year. It's another year.
Still on the planet. How we doing, Mikey?
Been better.
You been better? Not a happy new year for the Hot Tamales and Mikey Renault?
Yeah. We'll get into it.
All right, we'll get into it. Mikey, I'm going to have you step back from your mic a little bit. You are kind of screaming into my microphone right now, or at least in my earbud right now. Joe, the champ, how are we feeling? How you doing in 2025 already?
Great.
Yeah.
Feel good. It's about time.
Oh, yes. 3 years in a row. And you did it. You finally did it. We're
Finally
proud
broke
of you.
through.
Yeah.
Joe, you're not the Buffalo Bills of the fantasy football world or the MHA league. So there you go.
Well, thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
That means a lot coming from Todd.
It
Because,
does.
he likes his metaphors and similes and all that and comparisons. So you're not the Buffalo Bills. Well done. Well done. Well, let's get into it. We'll talk more, Joe, of course, about the game. We'll talk to Mikey about this past game, and then we'll talk about the season a little bit. And then if we have time, we'll do some MHA trivia. But let's get into it. Of course, we have to mention the third place game. We saw notorious CUP defeat Eaton W's 127-104. Kyler Murray had a 50-burger for Quane's squad. And, of course, pairing that up with Trey McBride. Boy, how good has he been this year? 12 receptions, 123 yards, and a touchdown for 24 points. Kevin's team got a big 24 points from Mike Evans and 11 points from Chase Brown. But CJ Stroud, boy, Kevin could not find a quarterback at the end of the year. He put up a mere 23 points. And Joe Mixon disappointing again. This time, just 5 points. So CUP ends the season with a third-place finish, and Eaton W's with a fourth-place finish. All right, let's get into this championship game. If you guys want to say anything about anything, just feel free to interrupt me. If there's something I missed or is wrong, or if you just want to talk about this moment, feel free to chime in. I'm going to give you some opportunities to talk during the whole thing, but just feel free to interrupt. Number 1 seed Kilgore Trout taking on number 3 seed Hot Tamales. Joe was looking for his second MHA title. And of course, we mentioned he'd been in the championship game 2 straight years with an 0-2 record, but then here a chance in his 3rd year in a row. Mikey was looking for his 4th championship. We kick things off on Christmas Day. Both kickers, how about that? Exciting kicker action going on. Went at it on the opening game of Week 17, and Chiefs kicker outscoring the Steelers kicker 5-4. Into the Baltimore-Houston game, we saw Derrick Henry do Derrick Henry things. The Ravens running back ran for 147 yards, had 2 receptions, and had a rushing touchdown. 23 points, not the 50 points Joe thought was going to take place. I guess he was on pace. And Joe showing some sweating, signs of sweating there as that game went along. But he ended up with just 23. In the Thursday night game, we saw quite the putrid football game between Seattle and Chicago. That was a 6-3 final score. Very bad NFL. Some things need to change in that regard, but we're talking fantasy here. It worked out well for Kilgore, however, who played the Seahawks defense, and they sacked Caleb Williams 7 times and intercepting. I guess it's kind of like interrupting the rookie quarterback once, and Seattle ended up with 16 points into Saturday. And before we get into the trifecta of games, we saw the news that Joe's amazing running back, Chuba Hubbard, was placed on the IL, and Joe's team already knew that they weren't going to have Tony Pollard available. So we had to make a decision. Joe, your thoughts on the injury and your next move, and of course that corresponds with a move Mikey made earlier this week. But just talk about what your thoughts when you saw that and what you did after that.
Well, I didn't really. That was kind of a surprise because I think earlier in the week they had said that Hubbard was on track to play, so I was planning on playing him, even though it wasn't that great of a matchup. But when I heard the news he was out, I jumped online. I saw J.K. Dobbins out there. I had already knew that Gus Edwards wasn't going to play, and I think they had just announced that Dobbins was going to come back. I had added Kamani Vidal earlier in the week, but. So yeah, I went and picked him up and figured I probably should play him since I'm not going to have anybody else.
Mikey, you dropped J.K. Dobbins. I don't know. I think it was a couple days before Christmas. This guy, he'd been pretty incredible. Of course, he was injured for a little while. Your thoughts when you saw Joe pick him up?
Well, and I was busy trying to find wide receiver help because I didn't know that whether or not Malik Neighbors was going to play. I had a waiver wire thing out there for Romeo Dobbs. Didn't end up getting him. I probably should have backed it up with Dobbins, although I don't know. I mean, he was available, so I didn't have to put in a waiver for him. In hindsight, it was probably a bad move. It didn't end up mattering in the long run, though.
But yeah, J.K. Dobbins on the other side, and he did well. We'll talk about that here in just a second. So in that Patriots-Chargers game, we saw Dobbins pick up right where he left off and scored 14 points. And, of course, scoring a late touchdown. I think right after that, Mikey and I were saying that the starters were benched. If they could have just gotten through that one more drive, then maybe Dobbins wouldn't come back to hurt him, but he eventually did. The Tamales did run with the Chargers defense. They got 11 points. They recorded 4 sacks, giving up just 7 points. While the Dobbins pickup worked out, the starting tight end for Kilgore Trout did not. Hunter Henry, 0 points. And just think about that number as we talk about how many points Joe actually scored in this one. No catches on 2 targets, 0 points from that tight end position. Tamales, had a 30 to 34 point lead. Boy, I'm just all rusty today. Heading into the final game on Saturday night, the Broncos versus the Bengals. And boy, did we see one of the best playoff performances in MHA history from Joe Burrow, who had already was coming off rolling in week 17. The Bengals quarterback piled up at a ridiculous 81 points, folks, 39 completions, 3 passing touchdowns, 25 rush yards, and a rushing TD. And to make things worse for the Hot Tamales, Burrow found Kilgore's wide receiver T. Higgins for 11 catches, 131 yards, and count them 3 touchdown catches, 33 points. Joe also got a TD catch in double figures from Broncos wide receiver Cortland Sutton. So what was once a 6-point Tamale lead turned into a 164 to 40-point lead for Kilgore Trout heading into Sunday. Joe, I'm sure you were watching this game. Maybe you weren't, and we're just getting some updates on your phone. But your thoughts about Joe Burrow, who has just been incredible all year and doing it against Broncos, who are usually pretty good against the quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, I was definitely watching. And going back to the Hunter Henry thing for a second, to pick up Dobbins, I dropped Zach Ertz.
Oh, that's right.
I think would have got me about 20 points.
The one of the few moves that didn't work out for Joe.
No, that one didn't work out. But it didn't matter in the long run. But that one after that morning game, I wasn't feeling too great about that. But yeah, no, I thought, obviously it was good to see Burrow throw that first touchdown to Higgins, then the second one, and then have Sutton get one. And then I think, when they were in the fourth quarter, and I think it was 17 all, and then I think the Bengals had the ball on the 1 yard line, and all the announcers were saying they could just sit on the ball, kneel it a couple times, kick a field goal with 20 seconds to go.
Yeah.
But what winds up happening is Burrow sneaks it in. Sutton gets a couple catches on the next Broncos drive when they go down and tie it up. Then they go to overtime, and it's like, I think Higgins got maybe 4 or 5 more catches and the touchdown in overtime. That was probably an additional like 30 points for me.
Unreal. I mean, I was sitting there next to Mikey. I'll give Mikey credit. He was pretty chill during the whole thing. He was just looking at me and laughing. Maybe we're just too old to care that much, but
Yeah.
I can only imagine someone. And then going into overtime. I know Mikey was kind of out of the room during overtime. He was taking care of some dinner stuff, but oh man, just to see them rush. You're right, because like Chase Brown was supposed to like go in, or like he stopped at the goal line. He stopped
Right.
on purpose,
He
hurt
hurt
himself, and the timeout came because he was hurt. And so at that point, changed everything the Bengals wanted to do. Then they ran Joe Burrow in. And then, of course, overtime, more points. I mean, I've been a benefactor of that. And so to have that happen for 80-some points is just 81.98 points. Just bonkers. Mikey, your thoughts as this is going down?
Like, honestly, I felt at halftime I felt good, and I probably shouldn't have. It was just that the reason I shouldn't have is because the Broncos, I think I told you, like every third down, they never got
Yeah,
the
they
Bengals
couldn't get
off
off
the
the
field.
field. Yeah.
Like they didn't punt until the overtime, which is just nuts. And so he was racking up completions the whole game. But I felt fortunate in the first half because they had only scored 1 touchdown, and even though that one was to Higgins, Sutton hadn't done anything at that point. I think Burrow maybe had like high 20s, and Higgins had like 8 at that point. So I was like, okay, this is workable. But yeah, then they started scoring points in the second half, and then, as Joe said, the end of the game situation happened, plus the overtime, and at that point, I was grasping at straws, trying to figure out what to do. Joe had 2 guys left on Sunday, and they're 2 good guys, and so yeah, I just wasn't a lot that I could do to make anything work after that Bengal game.
I was just going to ask, you were talking about, we talked about it on the podcast last week about your decision on your quarterback, and that may change based on what happened on Saturday. And that did force your hand because you had Aaron Rodgers in there and you went with Bryce Young. We talked about the Tampa Bay defense all year long. And so you're hoping to use that to an advantage. Maybe he can keep things going against that putrid defense. It did not happen that way. I'm going to go into Sunday here as you talked about it. Kilgore still had Jonathan Taylor and Brian Thomas Jr., and both put up extraordinary days, 46 points between them. Tamales got a whopping 27 from Malik Neighbors, who was just tremendous, despite Drew Lock as his quarterback, and 18 points from Saquon Barkley. But the Carolina cornerback couldn't take advantage of the nice matchup, just 35 points. This championship game belonged to Joe, who scored a one quarterback record for 210.63 points. He breaking his own record that he set earlier this year against, of course, Mikey. And so Kilgore Trout is your 2024 Mile High Affiliates champion. Of course, congratulations, Joe. And of course, congratulations to Mikey as well. They both had fantastic seasons. Of course, CUP eating W's as well. So Joe, it finally goes to, we're all obviously all texting each other and blah, 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 blah about the whole situation. But man, a good feeling, especially after 2 years in a row. I know you didn't have the season you wanted in the Bicker League, another league that myself and Mike are involved with. But once that final game was over, you must have felt pretty good, huh?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think once Saturday was the key game. Once that was over, I felt pretty good about where I was at, and but yeah, once it was official, I mean, it was nice that my team finally kind of performed in the championship game. I feel like the last 2 years I had good teams, but they kind of fizzled out in the Super Bowl. So it was nice to have them come through and kind of make up for that, and then some.
So Joe, let's talk about your team a little bit here. Who would you say is your MVP of this season? Is it Joe Burrow, or is it someone else, maybe like Chuba Hubbard, who you drafted, I think, in the 10th round and came up and had big games, huge games for you this year? But who would you say is your MHA MVP?
It's got to be Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
I think just the advantage, like having that top quarterback racking up all those points, and the gap, especially in this league, like the gap it creates between you and the other and the opponent. Like if you know, I mean, that was like a 45-point gap this week.
Yeah.
And I think for me regularly, if Joe Burrow's having 50, 60-point games going up against a 35, 40-point game, I'm starting with a 20-point advantage at least almost every week, because he was doing that, especially like in the second half of the season. Like he was putting, I think 50 was like the worst game he had.
And I'm looking over your draft, and you can kind of talk about it a little bit. And I mentioned this, I think I mentioned this on the podcast last week, or maybe we talked about it off air, but Kilgore's second round pick of Garrett Wilson and third round pick Cooper Kupp wasn't even in his starting lineup. He brought in other folks because they hadn't been performing. And so for him to be able to draft the bench that he did and then pick up guys later, I mean, that really goes to show that Joe was in it all season long and did a great job. I mean, Hubbard was a 9th round pick. Brian Thomas was a 10th round pick, and they both came up big for him. And then Pollard had a good year as well. Cooper Kupp was up and down. Garrett Wilson was kind of up and down, but he made moves. And is there anything else that surprised you about your draft, or something you want to, that when you look back on it, you're like, wow, that worked out, or I was surprised this happened?
I mean, I was surprised that Chuba Hubbard was like a serviceable running back all year. I didn't expect that. I just took him as a flyer, and I thought, well, he's a starting running back in Carolina, and I'll get at least 4 good weeks out of him if I need him. And it turned out he was pretty solid all year. But yeah, I mean, that's just lucky, I think, just that he turned out the way he did.
How about Jonathan Taylor? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say same with Brian Thomas. I mean, I had a little bit higher hopes for him, but I thought he would be good, some good wide receiver depth, and I think he finished like one of the top 10 wide receivers for the year, even though he was kind of in and out of my lineup too. But getting into the playoffs, he became like you have to play him.
Yeah, it's amazing how hot players get, and then you kind of have to run with them. And that's kind of what had happened with me. Was Tua was so hot that I just kept running with him, and I was starting to win games every week. And then the one day that he didn't have a good day, it ended up costing me. But yeah, just amazing on how that kind of comes together. Mikey, and you could tell me, we were talking about this before. Joe ended up with a 12-2 record. That's one of the top records. Does that tie the record for most wins? I mean, way back in the day, I don't know how long we did this for. We played until week 17, when eventually we changed it to week 16 because everybody's resting people. Obviously, we're seeing that this week in the NFL. But 12 wins in one season ranks pretty high up there, right, Miguel?
Yeah, I believe it ties for the number of wins for a champion.
Okay.
And I think Joe had the least amount of losses ever for a champion. So
wow, 12-2.
So it's the greatest MHA season ever. Is that what you're saying?
that is what I told Eric. I said it definitely.
Gotta be up there.
Yeah, it'd have to be up there because, I mean, other people have had seasons that are up there, but I mean, this, as far as teams that have completed the job, yeah, 100%. I mean, I can't deny it.
And what about his point total? He has 2,092.55, and there have been bigger seasons because we used to run a 2-quarterback league, but I mean, it's got to be up there, if not the top non-2 quarterback season. I mean, the numbers that Joe put up every week is just tremendous. I mean, we talked about Mikey putting up big numbers, but it just seemed like Joe was just really piling up the numbers. And so that number's got to be up there with one of the best. So, I mean, if we're talking about one of the best seasons, it's got to be up there.
Mikey, what was the record before the 12-2? Who had the?
I think Mikey said it was 12-3 by me way back and before yesteryear. But
yeah, 2004, Eric was 12-3.
12-3.
That's like
Probably.
I said, we played that.
Yeah,
at that point, it was week 17. It was the last week of the NFL season. We played it all the way till.
Was that the way all the way to up until? Because when did we stop playing? Because I remember I played in 2010. We played all the way to week 17 too, or week. Well, I guess it would be week 16. I guess it was still because that was still the shorter season. Shorter. They didn't add another game by then, I don't think. But go back and look and see.
Yeah,
I mean the best one. So like, Eric was 12-3 in 2004. I was 11-3 and 1 in 2005. Aaron was 11-3 2007. Eric was 11-3 in 2008, and then you were actually 11-3 in 2013.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Queen has one up there too, 11-3 in
So
2021.
so
But
the
yeah,
11 the 11
12-2.
and 3 seem to be we're seem to be kind of the a lot of us had the 11 and 3. Okay.
Yeah, I had a team that was 12-2, but
Mm-hmm.
lost in the championship game. So
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
A lot of records. We mentioned Kilgore breaking the record for most points in a one quarterback system, and he did it twice in 1 year. I mean, he had some just tremendous numbers this season. Mikey, you want to say anything about whether it's the championship game or about your season? I mean, you had another fantastic season. I mean, finishing second is nothing to sniff at for sure. You were up there in points. We talked about your three-headed monster of running backs who gave us fits all season long. What do you want to say about your 2024 season?
I mean, I kind of got all the one thing I'll remember about this season is not the three-headed monster. I think that I mentioned it on draft day after. I mean, the draft was over. That the one guy that I didn't get that I really wanted was Joe Burrow,
Damn it,
because
Joe.
I think it was fourth round. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was, and yeah, I thought I had picked Jacobs in the third round, and I thought that Burrow would get back to me at that point, and no, hey, Joe was savvy enough to snap him when he did, and yeah, that's what I'll remember, because if I would have had those three running backs plus Joe Burrow, I might have gone
Watch out.
undefeated.
Yeah, Joe picked him with the second pick in round 4.
Yeah,
And then 4 picks later, you picked Dak Prescott.
yeah,
Yeah. The funds
yep.
of fantasy football.
I remember those were the top 2 guys on my board too, and I was kind of deciding between them.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
So there you
I'm
have it.
really glad I didn't go with Dak Prescott.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
I think Dak Prescott's glad he didn't go. Hopefully all that money will keep him
Prescott.
warm, but
Man, well, there you have it. Kilgore Trout, Joe Vaccarelli, the top team here in 2024. Just looking at the draft order for the 2025 season. We'll lead things off here with Belt Sanders. We mentioned they finished 2-12. Gonzo Cat's going to draft second. They're at 4-10. Chad Powers Fan Club, they'll be drafting third at 5-9. Butterfinger is going to draft fourth at 5-9. They scored more points during the season than Chad Powers Fan Club. Lion Rip 6-8. They're drafting fifth. Drafting sixth is the NWA at 6-8. And then, of course, the playoff teams, Cooper's Cousins, they are going to be drafting seventh. Drafting 8th are the Lemonheads. Drafting 9th are Eaton W's. Drafting 10th, Notorious CUP. And, of course, the final 2, Hot Tamales drafting 11th and Kilgore Trout drafting 12th. So there you have it. Anything else we want to say about the season? One thing that stood out to me was no ties all season long. Fractional scoring. I guess people are on board for the fractional scoring for going forward, I would think.
Well, I always said ties maybe, could hurt you and save you at the same time. But yeah, that eventually had to join the rest of the world with fractional scoring. So okay with it, because I would think maybe some ties would maybe save my season a little bit, but it's okay. It's okay. I mean, I'm gonna put it this way. With the podcast is like for right now, I'm still, I could still say I'm champ a little bit, and then when the podcast is over, then no,
you're done. You're done. Once Joe secured that spot, you are no longer the champ. You're no longer the defending champ. I'm sorry.
I wanna no, but Joe, congratulations! Like it's you got your redemption. So
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Hey, it's when everything is right. I say this all the time on the podcast, and is fantasy footballs will love you one week and hate you the next, or love you for the entire season, or or hate you for but again, at the end of the day, win or lose, it's all in good fun, and that's why we play fantasy football, and fantasy football and sports in general takes us away from the realities of the world sometimes, and it's fun, but so forth. But like I said, congratulations getting that championship, and Yeah, but again, now you're the champ. Now I'm coming for you. Let's go. Everybody last season was like, everybody said their one of their goals was, to dethrone me, and so I like it. So yeah,
As
you
a
got the
collective
target,
group, we dethroned Todd.
but I'm coming for you next year. Coming for you.
Thanks, man. And
Yeah.
you were one of my 2 losses this year, so
Ah,
Unbelievable.
all the way
Hang your head. I'm
more
taking
than-
your trophy away from you just for that. And Gonzo Cats. So the 2 teams that had the worst seasons were the losses for.
and my 2 the 2 Super Bowls I lost were to both of them too.
Oh, yeah, well, that is true. That is true. How funny is that?
Oh,
Mikey,
that's
anything
it.
else about the season you want to talk about? I mean, you could talk about ties if you want, but anything else stand out here in this 23rd season of the MHA?
The reason that this season stood out for me was just how top heavy.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it was. I mean, we had 3 teams that had double-digit wins. I mean, there was some stank at the bottom. I mean, usually there's a little more like parity involved, and this year I felt like for a while there, me and Joe and Quayne were just kind of coasting through.
Yeah, for sure.
And Kevin too. Kevin had a really good year too.
Yeah, he finished with 9-5, and I got in with a losing record at 6-8. So it just goes to show. And that was the thing I was going to mention too, was don't ever give up on your season. You just don't know. I almost got there with a very similar record. And so even if your season doesn't start the way you want, you don't know what that 6th place is. And all you have to do is get in, because you just don't know what's going to happen if you can get in. And so to be able to get in at 6-8, I did score a bunch of points and had some unluckiness, but that's part of it. That's part of fantasy football. So you just keep going until, you're officially eliminated. We had a lot of teams still, with NWA was 6-8 and Lion Rip was 6-8, and there was a chance for, those kind of guys to get in. So there was still a lot to be decided on that last week of the regular season. So even if you start 0-2, 0-3, 0-4, there's a chance you can get in, because you just don't know what the season's going to look like.
Exactly. I mean, again, I'm not the champ anymore, but it is possible when you start 1-5. It's possible. It's possible.
Anything else we want to say about the season, Joe? Did anything stand out? Obviously, being the champion, only losing twice has got to be a cool feeling. Was there anything about this season that stood out? I don't know if it was like the court. We'll talk about this in a moment, so don't get too detailed. But just, was it the running backs that stood out, or the wide receivers that stuck out? Or, I mean, obviously Joe Burrow had a great day, but great season, excuse me. But yeah, anything stand out to you?
I think like from the fantasy season as a whole, I think just it's like kind of the resurgence of the running backs. And I think like it really, like Mikey's approach was really the way to go this year. Taking those running backs early, where, the past couple of years it was get those wide receivers, fill in the running back spots later, maybe take one receiver, one running back. But it'll be interesting to see how it goes next year. But I think that running back resurgence really stood out to me.
It somehow changes. It goes 1 year, it seems like it's wide receivers, and next year it's running back, or maybe it's a couple years in a row, and you have to kind of be wary. And we were talking about Saquon, and all the wide receivers went in that first round, minus, of course, like we talked about Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson were the obvious first rounders, and we're like, oh, Saquon, that's interesting. And then, of course, he has one of the most tremendous seasons in the history of running backs, and so that ended up working out well for Miguel, having that 3-headed monster who was just fantastic. On that same note, you guys want to do some MHA trivia?
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Let's go.
Time to play the game. Time to play the game.
So I don't know how this is going to go. I was going to do this as kind of like Family Feud, but I think that's not going to work out well with 3 people. So we're just going to go this way. So we're going to go through the top 5 in quarterbacks, the top 5 in running backs, top 5 in wide receivers, and top 5 in tight ends, and how they finished. Of course, there's still 1 week left to go, and those numbers may get elevated. I don't know if they get counted for next year, but this is going to be based on where they are after week 17. And so I'm just going to go through the line. I'm going to go Joe, Todd, and then Mikey. And then if you get a correct answer, then we'll give you a point. And then whoever gets to 4 points first wins MHA trivia. Does that make sense? Everybody down?
Word.
Sure.
Word. I love it. So, top 5 scoring quarterbacks in our league. Joe, you want to start with your guy first?
Sure. Let's go with Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow. That is a correct. Let me get this on. I'm going to have to put these in late. They're running off a little late here. But yeah, Joe Burrow, 866 points. What does he have here? That is quite a bit more than the next guy here. And he had 4,600 yards, 42 touchdowns, only 8 picks, and 2 rushing touchdowns to go with 202 rushing yards. So a healthy Joe Burrow is a good Joe Burrow. Todd, give me a top 5 scoring quarterback.
Jared Goff.
Jared Goff. Let me check out here. Very good. He is 4th. Jared Goff, 749 points, 4,398 yards, 36 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Didn't have any rushing touchdowns, but he did have a receiving touchdown. So go figure that. Mikey, chance for you to tie here. So there's 3 quarterbacks that you can choose from here.
I'm going to go with the guy that carried me in the other league. I'm going to go with Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield. Pro Bowl snub, by the way. 808 points. 2nd amongst all quarterbacks. He had 4,279, 39 touchdowns. He did have 15 picks, but he also ran for 310 yards and 3 touchdowns. 1-1-1. Back to you, Joe. Can you give me one of the 2 remaining top 5 scoring quarterbacks in our league?
I know he kind of has the running reputation, but I think Lamar Jackson finished up there this year.
Lamar Jackson from the Ravens, that is correct. He finished 3rd, 785 points, close to 4,000 yards and 39 passing touchdowns, only 4 picks. That's pretty incredible. He had 852 rush yards, but just 4 rushing touchdowns. I was surprised when I saw that today, but still 3rd in terms of scoring. So Joe gets to his 2nd point there. Over to you, Todd. Can you name the last quarterback on this? Oh, he says Josh Allen. Is that correct? It sure is. He actually number 5, 741 points. He had a lot of rushing touchdowns this year. 531 rush yards, 12 rushing touchdowns. He also had a receiving touchdown. He had 28 passing touchdowns and a little over 3,700, more than 3,700 yards. I got to make sure I'm on my AP style here, or Joe's going to correct me. So those are the quarterbacks. You guys got all 5 in 5 chances, by the way. It's pretty good. Let's go over to the running backs now. Mikey, top 5 running backs. You're pretty familiar with a couple of these guys. Who was the number 1? Can you tell me that?
Number 1, I'm sure has to be Saquon.
Saquon Barkley, that's right. 341 points. 2,000 yards. Well, this says 2,000 yards rushing. Yeah, he's not going to get the record. So 2,005 rushing yards. 13 touchdowns. He had 33 receptions, 278 yards, and 2 rushing TDs. Very good. Over to Joe. Give me another top 5 running back.
We'll go with Mikey's other guy, Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry, that is correct. So Saquon had 341, Derrick Henry 297. That's how good Saquon was. But Derrick Henry is pretty incredible as well. More than 1,700 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns. He had 17 receptions and 2 receiving touchdowns. So, man, Derrick Henry, great. Over to you, Todd.
Josh Jacobs.
Josh Jacobs. That's another Mikey guy. He was incredible. He finished 5th, 264 points, 1,200 yards rushing, 14 rushing touchdowns, 35 receptions, 340 receiving yards, and 1 TD. Well done, Todd. Over to Mikey. Can you tie things up here with the top 5 guy?
Okay, I'm going to take a guess because of the last 2 weeks that he's had that Jonathan Taylor might have snuck his way up there.
Jonathan Taylor. No, he is not on here, surprisingly, because he was so amazing. But as I'm going down the list here, it's like 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So it shows you how slow of a start maybe Joe could tell you about that, how slow of a start he had to his season. But what he did in the last few weeks during the playoffs was huge. So Mikey does not get a point there. Back over to you, Joe.
Bijan Robinson.
Bijan, one of the top guys drafted, and that is correct. He finished 4th, 1,200 yards, 12 rushing touchdowns, 59 catches for Bijan, 428 receiving yards and receiving touchdown. Joe picks up his 4th point, but we're going to keep going here. We'll just see who has the most points once we're done. Back over to you, Todd. Can you find the last running back in the top 5?
This one I'm going to kind of take a stab in the dark, but Chase Brown.
Chase Brown from the Bengals. No, he did not finish in the top 5. Going down the list here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. A really good season for Chase Brown. Didn't quite reach 1,000 yards, but did have 7 rushing touchdowns, 4 receiving. Mikey, we're going to give one more chance, and then we're going to move on to the wide receivers. Can you find that 5th running back?
I'm going to go with Jahmyr Gibbs.
Jahmyr Gibbs. Todd, that's your boy. One of the things you're going to be right about when we talk about our What Went Right, What Went Wrong episode here in a few weeks. But Jahmyr Gibbs finished 3rd, ladies and gentlemen, 292 points, a little over 1,200 yards rushing, 13 rushing touchdowns, 47 receptions, 3 receiving touchdowns. Big time for Jahmyr Gibbs. So we're going to go back to, we're actually going to go to the wide receivers now. So Joe's going to start things off there. Can you give me a receiver that finished in the top 5?
Jamar Chase had a huge year, so he's got to be number 1.
Definitely tied to Joe Burrow. And man, Jahmyr Gibbs. You know, I know that was one of the things that Mikey kind of talked about was, you know, Jamar Chase was kind of like all or nothing type of guy. He'd have these big 30-point weeks and maybe a week where he was under 5. He was pretty consistent all year long this year and had some big games still. But 117 receptions, 1,600 receiving yards, and 16 touchdowns. By far the number 1 guy. Well done, Joe. You have 5 points. Todd, a chance for you to find your 4th. Can you give me a guy that finished, a wide receiver that finished in the top 5?
I'll go with Amron. What's his name? Amron St. Brown.
Amon-Ra St. Brown
St.
from
Brown.
the Lions, right? That guy?
Correct. Yes, that guy.
Okay, well done. He finished
you.
2nd this season with 246. Jamar Chase, 296. Amon-Ra, 246. He finished 2nd. He had 109 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 12 receiving touchdowns. One of the Lemonheads here this season. He was fantastic even in the playoffs. Mikey, find a guy in the top 5. There's 3 of them left.
Give me Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson. Yes, he finished 3rd, 236 points. Despite Sam Darnold, well, obviously, that was the big conversation piece heading into the season. He finished 3rd. He reached exactly 100 receptions, a little over 1,400 yards, and 10 receiving touchdowns. Well done, Miguel. Back over to you, Joe. We have 2 wide receivers in the top 5 left.
I think my guy Brian Thomas Jr. got in there at the end.
Brian Thomas Jr., how about that? The rookie getting in to the top 5. 207 points, 80 receptions, just under 1,200 receiving yards, and 10 TDs. Brian Thomas Jr. I'd have to go through, we'll have to do a deep dive on him. He's had a pretty incredible season for the most part. He finished 14 or 12 or more in the last 5 weeks of the season. That's pretty incredible for a rookie, especially without a good quarterback, really, with Trevor Lawrence and what's Mac Jones, the backup, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Terrible. But great for Brian Thomas. Over to you, Todd. Can you find this last guy in the top 5?
CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb from the Cowboys. I was surprised to kind of see that. I mean, he's great, but he did not have the season he had 1 year ago when he finished as the number 1 guy, but still amazing. 101 receptions, 1,194 yards receiving, and only 6 touchdowns. So that definitely took a nosedive, but anytime you can rack up those receptions in a PPR league, that is huge. So that'll do it for the top 5. Let's go to tight ends, everyone's favorite position, especially Todd. We're going to go over here to Mikey. Can you name me a guy from the top 5?
See, I'm glad this fell to me. I get the easy one. I'll take Brock Bowers.
Brock Bowers. Did he finish number 1, do you think?
He should have.
Brock Bowers. Number 1 tight end as a rookie. 190 points, 108 receptions, ladies and gentlemen, as a tight end. Just a little over 1,100 yards receiving. Not a lot of TDs. Of course, he played for the abysmal Raiders, but still 108 receptions. That is incredible. Over to you, Joe. Give me a tight end in the top 5.
Speaking of not a lot of TDs, what about Trey McBride?
Trey McBride. Yes, indeed. He ended up finding that 1 receiving touchdown. He was on this record pace of most catches without a touchdown, but he ended up getting that. Trey McBride finished 3rd, 176 points, 104 receptions. A lot of those coming in the second half of the season. He had close to 1,100 receiving yards and just that 1 TD, but he also had a rushing TD on top of that. Well done, Joe. Over to you, Todd. There are still 3 tight ends in the top 5 we haven't mentioned yet.
Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce. Yes, indeed. He finished 5th. He finished in the top 5, 154 points, had 97 receptions. He had a low touchdown total of 3 and finished with 823 yards. All right, back to you. Now it's not so easy, Miguel, but you're still missing 2.
All right, I'm going to go with the guy that cost me the title in the bigger league. I'm going to go with George Kittle.
George Kittle. Yeah, poor Mikey also lost in the championship game of the other league that we're in with Joe. Not a good weekend for Miguel, but Kittle is the right answer. Well done, Miguel. You get that right. 177 points as the number 2 guy, 76 receptions, just over 1,000 receiving yards, and had 8 touchdowns. So pretty big number there. Despite the 49ers' troubles this season, he was incredible. Over to you, Joe. Can you find that last tight end?
Is it Jonnu Smith?
Jonnu Smith, are you sure? Yeah, you're right. 162 points. He finished 4th. 79 receptions, 828. Where am I at here? 828 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. He came on incredibly late, but he definitely was a huge reason. I was able to get into the playoffs and make some noise there. So there you have it. I got to do the tallying here, which is not going to be exciting for audiences, but 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points for Joe. We got here 6 points for Todd, and then we got here 6 points for Mikey. So Joe wins again, the champ in all aspects of MHA, winning MHA Trophy. Way to go, Joe. You're incredible.
Good year, guys.
Nothing you can do. Joe is the man. Well, there you have it. We have 2 shows left to go. On our next show, we're gonna have our award show where we're gonna talk about, of course, our MVP. Is it Joe Burrow? You have to wait and see. We'll also talk about our bust of the year. That could be Chris Olave for those who, you may have forgotten him. He's been so bad this year. And of course, the T.Y. Hilton Award. And there's a lot more, of course, coming up from that. And then our final show of the year is the kind of the show where we look back and where us so-called experts were right, where we were wrong. We'll talk about some bold predictions. And it should be fun. So with 2 more shows left to go, and then we're in the off season, and those who do fantasy baseball, then we're into that, which is always so much fun. But there you have it. Anything else before we get out of here, gentlemen, that you want to talk about? Joe, do you want to just say how amazing you are once again, pat yourself on the back, or should we get out of here?
Oh no, it's always luck. But this is always one of my favorite leagues. It's so much fun. It's usually pretty competitive, and there's always guys. Like Mikey, my hat's off to you. You had a great season in both leagues, really, but especially in this one, it was a great team, and it took a lot. My team to have to score a lot of points to beat you in both our matchups this year. So,
over 400.
Yeah,
record setting. Bananas. Well, that's awesome. That's the whole point of this league. I know some of us probably take it a little too seriously at times, but that's the whole point, is to keep these guys. I mean, I've known Joe since college, and he's got kids now. I'm still at college, I guess. I'm also getting my master's, and so I'm working on that. But just to see everybody and talk to them and get these texts, and that's what it is at the end of the day, is to really kind of just keep in touch with all the people that we care about, and we hope they're doing well, and with their families and whatever's going on with them. So we hope everybody's out there having a great time here at the MHA. I want to thank Joe for coming on, of course, winning a championship, of course, Todd and Mikey. We'll talk to you guys next week, but of course, doing it every week, it can be tough sometimes. We have to shift the day every once in a while, but we're adults now. Well, some of us try to act like it, I guess, but it's not easy. But we love doing this podcast. We love this league. We love fantasy football in general, really. That's why some of us are in multiple leagues. So I want to thank everybody for coming on. Happy New Year to MHA. And we'll see you next week on the award show. So definitely tune in, and we'll catch you next time.